recording. Okay, this is what we're going to look at is a broader snapshot of what's taking place in the beginning of Bamidbar versus the end of Bamidbar where we find ourselves. You can hear me, right? Vivian, you can hear me. You're the only one who's unmuted, so you can hear me?
I hear you.
Okay, great. Last week in Parshat Chukas, we actually moved into the 40th year in the desert. It doesn't say like all of a sudden when we skipped, but we do. And then what happens in our Parsha, so if you have your Chumash handy, what's going to happen is again, let's look at the topic, sort of topic headings in Parshat Pinchas. So it's 877 if you're in the Stone Chumash. And let's see, a new attitude toward Midian. Now, what happened is that what Bilam failed to do, to curse the Jews, so they decided to go with plan B. So they had the women of Midian to infiltrate, and there was a whole plague. And then our Parsha stands, it was a cliffhanger last week, like Dynasty used to have at the end of the season, because we don't know if Blake Carrington and Alexis are going to make it. I'm dating myself. The Pinchas takes matters into his own hands, and he stops this terrible episode that's happening, this terrible licentious behavior that's happening in front of Am V'Ed, in front of everybody. And then Pinchas gets sort of the lifetime contract as the Kohanim. And then it says we have a new attitude towards Midian, chapter 26, a new census, and a lot of names, a census total, count of the Levium. Then we have the grievance of Slavchad's daughters. That's my favorite parsha, a guy who had 5 daughters. It used to be my favorite parsha. And then the laws of inheritance. And then here, God shows Moshe the land. And then here we have on page 889, Moshe asks for a successor.
I'll switch these with you.
Okay. Moshe asks for a successor.
Dina, I think you have to mute your phone.
So and what happens is it's on page 888, 889, where we have Moshe's asking for a successor, and it's going to be, of course, Yehoshua. Now, what we look at our Parsha versus certainly the beginning of the book of Bamidbar, we have what's called a new leadership model. There's a new leadership model. We have Pinchas at the beginning of the Parsha, and we have Yehoshua at the end of the Parsha. In other words, the Parsha itself is bookended by Pinchas, who takes a role of leadership. He does something drastic, for which you might say, and there's a lot of arguments saying, what right do you have to kill somebody else? And we have all this halakha conversation, what's called kadna in pogimbo, where it's righteous to be zealous in some instances. People often are zealous for the wrong reasons, and they don't pick the right times. And at the end, we have Moshe picking a successor, or Hashem telling Moshe to pick a successor, who is Yehoshua ben Nun, is his trustee, Yehoshua. Okay? And in the middle, you have Karbonos, and you have census, etc. It's not really so much part of the narrative. But the Parsha begins with a leadership model, ends with a leadership model. But it actually, if we zoom out and we look at the whole book of Bamidbar, we see also different leadership models. There's Moshe Rabbeinu's leadership model at the beginning of the 40 years, and then there's Moshe Rabbeinu here. And we're going to look through a few different episodes, and you'll see how incredibly different it is, how a difference one generation can make, which means that not every leader can lead in every generation. It just doesn't work that way. A lot of this is inspired, as I mentioned in Shabbos when I was studying. I have a good friend, Rabbi Nati Helfgott, who is a rabbi in Teaneck in Netivot Shalom. He's also he's an unbelievable Bible scholar, a Tanakh scholar, and he's also a good friend. And I like him because he's not afraid to get into trouble. And, he stands for what he believes in. I like that. And not everybody agrees with him. That's fine. I don't agree with him on a lot of things, but we're still good friends. That's allowed. And but he's the head of the Tanakh department and Hebrew Studies department, I believe, I think it's Hebrew Studies at Yeshiva Chovevei Torah in Riverdale. So let's look at let's go back. So first we have to go back to where everything falls apart for the Jewish people. We all know the easy way to know when that happens in Bamidbar. Everything's going fine. They go out, they have their encampments, they have their formations, they sound the shofar, they're going to do this, they're going to do that. When does everything fall apart? It's very easy to remember, is that the Jewish people go bankrupt in chapter 11. Chapter 11 of Bamidbar is when everything falls off. So if we look at chapter 11, let's look at chapter 11. Chapter 11 on page 786. They are traveling away from Mount Sinai. Everything is great. We have Vayihi ben Soa ha'aron. And when the ark traveled, of course, we know this because this is what we say every time we take out the Sefer Torah. And all of a sudden, Vayihi ha'am kimis'onim Rabbi Oznei Hashem, Vayishma Hashem, Vayichara pavativ rabam eish Hashem, vatochal b'ktzei hamachaneh. Chapter 11, verse 1. The people took, I know this is going to be a very hard one for you to believe, people started complaining. The people took to complaining. It was evil in the ears of Hashem. Hashem heard, his wrath was flared, and a fire of Hashem burned against them, and it consumed them at the edge of the camp. Vayitzak ha'am el Moshe, vayispalel Moshe el Hashem, vatishka ha'esh. Moshe, they cry to him, because like, what do you do? When God punishes you, you cry to Moshe. And Moshe davened to Hashem, and the fire stops. Okay? So, here they're complaining. A plague comes. What's their reaction towards Moshe? It's right away they go to davening. Notice here, they're not complaining. They're not angry with Moshe. They don't complain to him. They don't, and which by the way is going to change. It doesn't last. Okay, we don't see this pattern that we're going to see later of, oh, why did you bring us here? We have to go back to Egypt, etc., etc. That doesn't happen. Moshe davens and the fire stops. Okay, fine. Next, we have something called Kivros HaTa'ava, which immediately follows. People start complaining about food and the meat. Look what happens next. And the rabble that was among them, they cultivated a craving, and the children of Israel also wept. And they said, who will feed us meat? Oh, remember the fish that we ate in Egypt free of charge, the cucumbers, the melons, the leeks, the onions, and the garlics. I mean, this is, by the way, what they call fake news. This is where they're talking about, oh my gosh, remember the continental breakfast that we had? It was just like they had in the King David Hotel in Jerusalem, for breakfast, all the spreads. But oh, it was so great in Egypt, and every day they brought it to us, and we had fresh rolls, and we had pickles and all these kind of things. He says, but now our life is parched. There's nothing. We have nothing to eat but mun all the time. The Torah describes the mun. It tasted like the dough kneaded with oil. So Moshe heard the people crying in their family groups, each one at the entrance of his tent. And the wrath of Hashem flared greatly. And in the eyes of Moshe, it was bad. Okay? Moshe says to Hashem, look at this in Pasuk Yud Aleph, 11:11. Vayomer Moshe el Hashem, lama harayosu li'avdecha, v'lama lo matzasi chen b'yeinecha, lasum es masa kol ha'am hazeh alai. Ha'anochi harisi es kol ha'am hazeh ashe'im anochi yilidu, ki samar elai sa'ir v'cheikecha, kasher yisa amin asenek ala demashu nishvat elav losa. Why have you done this evil to your servant, Moshe says? Why have I not found favor in your eyes that you placed the burden of this entire people upon me? Did I conceive this entire people? Did I give birth to it that you say, carry them in your bosom as a nurse carries a suckling to the land that you swore to your forefathers? Where am I supposed to get meat to give all these people? They're whining. I can't carry it. It's too heavy. How am I supposed to do that? Okay? So here Moshe, the second time, which is only a few verses later, notice how he switches gears. He doesn't daven for them. He doesn't try to understand what's bothering them. Maybe he does understand, and that's why he doesn't daven. But he doesn't launch into tefillah right away. Instead, and by the way, their complaint is not about Moshe even. His reaction is, why did you do this to me, God? And they're not even complaining, Moshe, what, you're a lousy leader. They're not saying, Moshe, what did you do? They're saying, what are we supposed to eat? Remember what we used to have back in Egypt. It could be, by the way, that when the people started complaining, look at verse 10 carefully. You look at Pasuk Yud carefully. It says, Vayishma Moshe esa'am bochel mishpachosav ish lepesach ohalo. Moshe hears the people crying, each to his family. He doesn't even know at the outset what's going on. Vayishma Moshe means only now he catches wind and he hears rumbling in the crowd. Now, it's not like every time something happens, they're going to go straight to the leader. He finds out, he catches wind of what's happening, and then it comes to his attention. Okay? And he doesn't pray for them. He gets angry. And when we see this pasuk, when we see in pasuk Yud Aleph, when he says, Lama harayos li avdecha, what immediately comes to mind? What comes to mind is what he says earlier in Parshat Shemos, in Sefer Shemos. In Sefer Shemos, when God gives him the job, okay, he says, why did you do this evil? There's a slight difference though, okay? There's a big difference. If you have Shemos, I'll read you the pasuk, but if you have Shemos 5:25, look at when Moshe says to the end of Parshat Shemos, look at 5:22, page 316. After Paro doubles the bricks and they can't get it, so Moshe, the people are complaining, how are we supposed to do this? And you're making it harder on us, Moshe, you're supposed to be saving us. So Moshe comes back to Hashem and he says, Adonai, lama harayos lam hazeh lama zeh shalachtan. He says, why have you done evil to this nation and why have you sent me? Here he says, Lama harayos li avdecha. Here he's not talking about the Jewish people, but he uses the same terminology. Why have you done this evil to me? When he doesn't like what's happening, over there he's defending the nation, over here he's defending himself. He's saying, he makes it very, he's like, what are you doing? And he continues here, and he says, look at page 790 again. We're back in Bamidbar. He says, I can't carry this nation by myself. He says, V'im kacha atoseli, hargeni naharog yimatzasi cheminach. Moshe turns very dramatic. Oh God, I can't. If this is how you're gonna do it, just kill me now. Just kill me now. I can't do it. If I haven't found favor in your eyes, I don't want to see this evil. I could die. I mean, I don't know if he was so dramatic, melodramatic. That's just me adding my my things. Now, why does he have to write in imatzasi chen be'enecha? He says, if this is what you're going to do to me, kill me. Imatzasi chen be'enecha. So if you look at the first source that we have here, it's the Ibn Ezra. And the Ibn Ezra says, the Rashbam says the same thing, is that what he's saying here is, if you haven't found favor in my eyes, meaning, why did you ever give me the job to begin with? So he's talking now, this is a couple of years later, and Moshe Rabbeinu was saying, why, I regret ever taking this job, okay? They want to go back to Mitzrayim. He's like, if they want to go back to Egypt and say, look, all the great things, he says, you know what? I want to go back to my original status too, which was pre-leader. I don't want to ask for this leader. Okay, so that's his take on it. So how does God answer him? So God answers him again on page 790. We're back in Baaloscha. They start complaining. So right away in verse 16, Hashem says to Moshe, okay, here's what we're going to do. I want you to gather 70 individuals, and they are Ziknei Ha'am v'Shotrav, etc. And he goes on and he says what's going to happen. These people, I will descend and speak to you there, and I will increase some of the spirit that is upon you and place it upon them, and they shall bear the burden of these people with you, and you will not bear it alone. So Moshe Rabbeinu complains. He says, I can't handle this myself. I don't even want the job to begin with. Why did you do this to me? They're complaining. He doesn't daven for them to get what they want. He just says, I don't want this job. So God says, okay, you don't want the job? I'm going to get you some help. I'm going to bring in a couple of ringers for you. Here's 70 people that will come and help you. And he says, and I will increase some of the spirit that is upon you. And to the people, you'll say, prepare yourselves. And who will feed us meat? Fine. He says, don't worry, you're going to have meat coming out of your kish because they're going to have so much meat. Okay? So he has, and the word that he says in Pasuk Yud Zayin, v'yarati v'dibarti b'cha b'sham v'atsalti min haruach asher alecha. So what is the word v'atsalti min haruach? So if you look, it's a very small print. I apologize for the small print. but it's from the Chizkuni. It's source number 2. Why does it, and what's bothering the Chizkuni, he's saying, why does he have to take from Moshe? Why, God doesn't have enough spirit, he can't just give it to 70 new guys? Why does he have to take from Moshe? What, God doesn't have enough spirit that if he takes it from Moshe? Ani omer lecha, tadun es ami v'nasati lecha chachma ledunam v'esruchi nasati alecha. God says, I gave you the capability to handle this job. I gave you my spirit. Not only that, I gave you chachma. I gave you the wisdom to be able to do it. And you say to me, v'ata amarta lo achal anochi levadecha, and you say, I can't do it by myself. He says, chayecha yinasein lehem meruchacha. He says, you know what? It's going to cost you. I'm going to take it away from your own spirit. So actually, this v'atzalti, it's not actually a solution to Moshe's problem. It's a rebuke. This turns into a critique against Moshe Rabbeinu, where the Chizkuni says, what are you complaining about? Why did you say that you can't do it? I gave you the capabilities, and you say you can't handle it. I'll show you. I'm going to take from your capabilities, and I'll give it to some other people. What happens then, what follows is the story of Eldad and Medad at the end of this parsha. It's starting in verse 26 on page 792. That these two, the 70 people come, and it's just Eldad and Medad. They remain with prophecy. And look what happens here. Of course, we have the overzealous Joshua and Moshe's sort of kind of like passé response. Look at this. Verse 26. 2 men remained behind in the camp. The name of one was Eldad, the name of the second was Medad, and the Spirit rested upon them. They had been among the recorded ones, but they had not gone out to the tent, and they prophesied in the camp. The youth ran and told Moshe, and the youth is ostensibly it's Yehoshua, and they said, Eldad and Medad are giving prophecy in the camp. Yeshua ben Nun, the servant of Moshe since his youth, spoke up and said, my Lord, Moshe, incarcerate them. Adoni Moshe Kalaim. You see Yoshua defending the honor of his Rebbe, of his mentor, of his person, Moshe, and he says, put them in jail. And Moshe says in response to verse 29, Hamakane Atali, are you being zealous for my sake? Would that the entire people of Hashem could be prophets if Hashem would but place his spirit upon them. Meaning, Halavai, they should all be prophets. What's the big deal? So Yehoshua's response is, wait, no, Moshe's the prophet. And Moshe's response is, all right, so they're also prophets, okay? When we understand what's happening here, Moshe understands that he had some of his powers, so to say, were diminished, were taken away from him. And therefore, he's not taking it in such a harsh manner as Yoshua, because Moshe Rabbeinu was told by God, you think you think you can't handle it? I'll give it to other people. Yehoshua doesn't get that. Yehoshua still remains zealous. So that's what happens now with this story of Eldad and Medad, and we see now that other people have prophecy. This is the first time that we see now in Moshe Rabbeinu's surroundings, in his environments, that there are other people that have prophecy. It goes further. The end of the parsha has the story of Moshe, Aaron, and Miriam. They start talking about him. They challenge Moshe's status as a prophet, and Hashem says, no, he's very unique. But however, if we look at what's happening, if you look at the placement in the parsha, slowly but surely, the sort of the untouchable status of Moshe Rabbeinu is now eroding. We see it slightly, ever so slightly diminishing. In other words, in the beginning of Bamidbar, would Aaron and Miriam ever have had that conversation about Moshe? Would an Eldad and Medad take place? Only because Moshe himself sort of doubts his own abilities, that opens the door and other things come in. Now we go ahead to the next parsha where we have the story of the Meraglim. Okay? When the people complain against Moshe Rabbeinu, and they complain after they hear the report of the spies, who's the one that gets up to defend Moshe or to defend God? It's not Moshe. Kalev ben Yefuna. It's Caleb. Caleb is the only one that actually stands up and voices his opinion. It's not Yoshua. It's not Moshe. Moshe, the reaction we see in a few places is Vayiplu al pneihem. Look at source number 3 and number 4. When the pasuk says, I'll read you the exact verse. When the spies come back on page 802 in chapter 14, verse 5, they come back and they say, we can't live in this land. We'll never survive. We'll never make it there. Why does God bring us to this land? He's going to kill us there. And everybody says, Nitna Rosh Shiva Mitzrayim. They said, let's appoint a leader and go back to Egypt. So what's the reaction of Moshe and Aaron? Pasuk 5 on the bottom. Vayipol Moshe v'Aaron al Paneihem. L'fnei kol kahal adas Yisrael. B'nei Yisrael. They fall on their faces. They have no reaction whatsoever, but they fall on their faces. What does that mean, they fall on their faces? Say something. Do something. They don't do anything. Look at what Rav Hirsch says. Vayipol. By the Nitna Rosh of the previous verse, this is source number 3 in our sheets, the people renounced their allegiance, thereby on their side, their mission had come to an end. They threw themselves down before Kol Kahal Adas, is the council entrusted with the leadership of the people, the elders. By throwing themselves down before them, they gave their leadership back to the people. These are very strong words, Rav Hirsch says. That by giving up in front of them, the body language speaks that they gave the leadership back to the people and expressed thereby that with this renouncement by the people of obedience to them, their power was at an end, and humanly they could do nothing further. Again, slowly eroding the armor of invincibility that they have had until now as leaders of the Jewish people. Now all of a sudden, Rav Hirsch says they gave it back to the people. Look at the Eben Ezra. I'm sorry, it's the Sforno in source number 4. The Sforno says, Vayipol Moshe v'Aaron, we have it in English too. We posted the pasuk in Koheles that we said certain things are so messed up that they cannot be straightened. He says this is when something has been twisted out of shape, cannot be straightened out again. The Sforno says this is akin to when sometimes the Sanhedrin, they had to react in such a way where there was nothing they could possibly do, and they were rendered as powerless. So now, starting from the beginning of Bamidbar, the people complain. Moshe starts off davening for them. Next time, he gets angry with them. He doesn't daven for them. He complains to God about his job. God says, oh, you're worried about your job? You don't think you can do it? I'll find people who can do it. Other people end up doing it. People start complaining about Moshe Rabbeinu, his own siblings. The spies come, and they lose their hold on the people. As the Rav Hirsch says, they give the leadership back to the people. And then, of course, leads into the episode of Korach. Now we have Korach. Korach is a direct assault. Now, the Meraglim was not an assault on Moshe and Aaron. They were the guinea pigs for it. They were the targets because people thought they couldn't go into Israel. But Korach now takes direct aim at the persona of Moshe Rabbeinu, at the persona of Aharon. And even after they're proven wrong, and they have the showdown and the fire pans and the swallowing and the thing and the staff and the almond, and what happens? The people still complain, and they say, we don't believe that you're the chosen leaders. Okay, and it says, if you look, and perhaps the most damning phrase is in Perek Yud Zayin, Pasuk Vav. Again, I apologize for all the jumping around on page 828. Vayilonu kol adas b'nei Yisrael mimacharos al Moshe ve'al Aaron le'mor atem hamisem es am Hashem. The people, after even seeing all the signs, again, before they see the peaceful sign of the almonds, so what happens is the earth swallowed them up, clearly proving that God has chosen Moshe. They all complain the next day against Moshe, and they say, you have killed the people of Hashem. It's unbelievable. You've killed the people of Hashem. Now, between Korach and Chukas, the next parsha, we skip 38 years, and we go to Mei Meribah. Now, this generation becomes very clear. Moshe does not know how to deal with them. They did not necessarily grow up in the same sort of slavery. They have grown up knowing that they're going to go into the generation. They've seen their parents who went through the slavery and never get to see the promised land. So you can imagine what it does to their psyche. They've only known life in the desert, pretty much. They've only known sort of a miraculous existence where you wake up every morning and there's manna at your doorstep and there's water flowing. They don't know what it's like to have to struggle necessarily. We could certainly identify this between, maybe what our parents or grandparents had to go through versus what our kids have today. One of the things I will never understand, and you'll forgive me, Miriam, maybe you're an exception, but I don't understand millennials. Are you a millennial? Are you considered a millennial?
I don't know. I honestly don't know. But then I'm young, but then I work with teenagers and then I feel old in a second because they say something. I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about. And I'm only 5 years older than them,
Right. And I'm only 5 years older than you, so I guess you're a teenager. I don't understand millennials. Millennials is a whole people have like done major studies on this of like, I'm working here 3 weeks. I should have a title and a raise, whatever. That's a whole other conversation for a whole other time. But anyway, we go now to Mei Meriva, the waters of strife. Okay. And that's chapter 20. It's on page 842. What happens in the bottom of 842? Moshe is told here, Miriam has died. The people complain to Moshe, and they gathered on Moshe and Aaron. They fight with him, and they said, "Why did you bring us to this desert to die? Why did you bring us out of Egypt to this horrible place? It's not a place where anything can sprout, nothing can grow here." And look at the end of this first complaint in Pasuk Vav on page 842. They go to the opening of the tent of meeting, the Ohel Moed. Here we see again, Vayiplu al Pneihem. They fall down. They have no idea what to do. They can't fathom how to handle this crowd. If you look at source number 5, here again we have the Ibn Ezra, and then we have Rav Hirsch. Ibn Ezra says, "Vayova Moshe v'Aaron pnei hakahol kidemus borachim." Also, very, very damning words by the Ibn Ezra. He says, "Why did they go to the tent of meeting and fall down?" He says, "Borachim." They were running away. They were trying to escape their responsibility, or they just didn't know what to do, so they just like maybe hiding from the masses. Look at what Rav Hirsch says. Vayavo Noach el hateva. He gives a similar phraseology where we have with Noach. They made no answer. They fled for refuge to the tent of appointed meeting, as always, when there was a question whether the mission was really given and directed by God. It was like, when you're playing tag, base. I'm on base. You can't touch me. And that's kind of the feeling that I always get when I read these psukim, or certainly when I read this Ibn Ezra, is that they have completely, they have completely lost touch with what's happening with these people. Which was why many of the people explain is, why did he hit the rock? Well, if you remember, the first time that God wanted to bring water, he said, hit the rock. Here he's saying, speak to the rock. Moshe understands, maybe he's from the generation where he hit the rock. Now, you can apply this certainly to maybe different modes of education that we have seen, let's say maybe the way we were growing up or where our kids are growing up. When we were growing up, if a parent hit a child, let's say, okay, in the old world, nobody would say boo, right? Elian, is that true? Right? Right? You get it, like, I'm sorry, I'm gonna, probably go to jail for this, but I believe that once in a while a kid needs a good patch. I'm sorry, that's the way I was raised, and I find it to be very effective. I'm not saying you have to beat your children, God forbid, hurt your children, God forbid, but frask and pisk, once in a while, as they say in Yiddish, within reason, to know what it stands for. Now, so in the first generation, maybe that's the language they understood of hitting a rock. In this next generation that grows up in the Midbar and has all this miraculous existence, you can't hit the rock. God's like, you got to speak. They don't answer to Korach. They don't respond to the Korach type of things. They respond to the almonds. Maybe they need, peace, love, and unicorns. They need to have, you have to sit and talk about their feelings. Snowflakes. Right? Snowflakes. Right? I don't know. But that certainly is a way, it's an approach. It's a way to look at what's happening. Okay. So now that we see that the old world approach is not working on this generation, now we have some other episodes in the remaining parts of the Parsha till we get to Pinchas, which are so telling, but at the same time, so easy to just gloss over and to look at, okay? So, what happens right after the waters of strife? Right after the waters of strife, after Mei Meriva, and that thing is all taken care of, and the punishments are meted out, they're called Mei Meriva, beginning of the fourth Aliyah, the very end of page 844 going to 846. It's chapter 20, verse 14. Moshe sends emissaries Mikadesh Melech Edom. Okay? Moshe sends an emissary to Kadesh, to the king of Edom, and he says, listen, we're Mishpacha. We know Edom is Mishpacha. Edom comes from Esav. And he says, listen, we have hardship. We were in Egypt. We're so many years. We cried out to Hashem. He sent an emissary, took us out of Egypt. He says, you know what? We're Kadesh, right near the edge of your border. Let's pass through. We're not going to step on your flowers. We're not going to ruin your place. We're just going to walk through where, we won't drink your water. We're going to go on the King's Road. We will not go right or left until we pass through your border. And Edom said, you will not pass through me because I'm going to come with you with sword. And by the way, this leads to an ultimate punishment. That's why we say that, an Edomite cannot come into, and the same thing happens with Ammon and Moab. We don't take an Edomite because they should have accepted us as family, as mishpacha. They should have had our karetz hatov, and they should have let us come through. Okay. But look at Pasuk Yud Ches, and tell me if you see it. Tell me if you see a difference here. Vayomer Elav Edom lo savar bi, and what's the response in Yud Tes? Vayomer Elav b'nei Yisrael b'mesila na'alei v'yemei mecha nishta ani miknai ne'asati mechram rak ein davar b'raglai evor. The people said, we shall go up on the highway. If we drink your water, we'll pay for it. Nothing will happen. And they said no. So Edom doesn't let. Now, it's so subtle, but it's so powerful. The beginning of the conversation starts, who initiates and sends the messengers? Moshe. Who does the talking ultimately? People. It says B'nai Yisrael. Pasuk Yutes, it says B'nai Yisrael. Let's go ahead to chapter 21. When you go to chapter 21, here we have the Canaanite king of Arad. He hears that the Jewish people are sitting by Negev, and they came with Derech Asarim, that path. Vayilachem b'Yisrael v'yish b'menu Shevi. It's the only time that we have an American automobile mentioned in the Chumash. It says Shevi. Vayilachem, and they do battle with the Jewish people, and they took a captive. Vayidar Yisrael neder laHashem vayamar im nason titin es am hazeh b'yadi v'acharamti es areihem vayishma Hashem b'kol Yisrael vayitin es haknani v'acharim esem es areihem vayikra Hashem amakum karma. Israel made a vow to Hashem, and they said, if you deliver this people, if you deliver the enemy into my hand, I will consecrate their cities. Hashem heard the voice of Israel, and he delivered the Canaanite, and it consecrated them in their cities, and they named the place Charma. Who's missing notably from the Parsha? Moshe. Moshe's not here. Who's talking? Who's making the vow? Who's making a deal with God? And we'll dedicate the city, etc. Right? Who is it? It is Yisrael. Chazal also tells us here that who is this Canaanite Melech Arad? Okay? They say that it's Amalek, which only further grace it, because who defeated Amalek originally? Moshe Rabbeinu. Remember, it says that when Moshe would raise his hands and they would win, and when he lowered his hands and they would look. So, where's Moshe? He's not even involved in the proceedings. The Torah leaves him out of it. Again, we see the slowly disappearing from the scene figure and the leadership activities. Moshe Rabbeinu is nowhere to be seen. He's absent. He's completely gone. Look at, if we go on, they go through Moab, okay? And they have these battles, etc. Look at page 852. And everything is where? Finally they have a song that they sing. And look at verse 17. And if this doesn't like fly right in your face and jump off the page at you, and it says, Az Yashir Yisrael. When we say Az Yashir, automatically 99 out of 100 times you can say Az Yashir Moshe. The Torah is being very blatant here in its language. They're saying, look at Parshas B'Shalach and look at now. Parshas B'Shalach, when the Jews were coming through all their successes and all their conquests, was Az Yashir Moshe, Uvnei Yisrael. Here it's what? Az Yashir Yisrael Sashir Azos. Ali Be'er Enullah. Who's singing after the conquest? It's B'nai Yisrael without Moshe. Moshe's not even in this picture. Okay? Now, if you look and what happens right afterwards, they have to go conquer the king of Sichon. Who's sending the emissaries? Look at it, Pasuk Chaf Aleph. Vayishlach Yisrael Malachim. Who's sending the angels? Who's sending the messengers? What Malachim means? It's Yisrael. It's the same thing. We won't go up in your fields. We're going to pay for what we take. Whatever it is, they reject them. But it's not Moshe Rabbeinu. It is the people of Israel. He's not there. Then that's followed by the story of Balak and Bilam. Bilam and Balak is an amazing story because it's completely like outside of the scenes. Bnei Yisrael is not involved in it. Moshe certainly is not involved in it. He's not mentioned at all. It has nothing to do with him. He may or may not have known about it. We don't know what the Jewish people happen about it. And then comes the episode at the end of Balak, and it brings us to our Parsha of Pinchas, is the story of Baal Peor. Once they couldn't curse the Jewish people, so they decided they're going to infiltrate them, and they're going to get them and seduce them to worship the Baal Peor. And the way the modern commentaries look at this, they say that the Baal Peor was the golden calf episode of this generation. This is their golden calf, okay? And where it is that when they had the golden calf, who spoke up and said, Mila Hashem Elai? It was Moshe Rabbeinu. Who's the one who acts here? It's not Moshe. It's not Aaron. It's Pinchas. It's Pinchas who does that, okay? And when it comes to the census here, this is also really interesting. When we have the census, look at the page 878, beginning of chapter 26. Normally when Hashem wants to take a census and he wants to do something, Hashem calls Moshe. Look what happens here. Vayomer Hashem el Moshe v'el Elazar ben Aaron HaKohen. Now Aaron has died already. What does he need Elazar? Because you know what? It's not Moshe alone anymore. Moshe is already nearing the end of his career. And what happens? He has Elazar to help him. Okay? All of that. Finally, we reach our Parsha, and we reach chapter 27, and we have the story of a successor from Moshe Rabbeinu. So now we're going to look page 888, and look what Hashem says to Moshe. Vayomer Hashem el Moshe, alei el har havarim hazeh ureis haaretz asher nasati lifnei Yisrael. He says, go up on the Mount Avarim, which you're going to see really is Har Nevo. You could read through, I shared with you the Ramban. The Ramban, there's a machlokas in the Rishonim here about whether Moshe fulfilled this right away or was till later. The Ramban says, no, it was not meant to be done now because he still has to give his speech. You know, we let him give a speech when he leaves, right? You know, we don't just let him leave. So we let him give a speech. So he gives a speech for a month and 7 days from Rosh Chodesh Shvat till Zayin Adar. So it's not yet, but at the time comes. But some say, no, he had to do it right now. Anyway, he says, and what's going to happen is always very sad. You're going to see the land, but you're not going to go into the land. And you're going to die like Aaron did. He says, and by the way, in case you were wondering, like we needed the extra, the shtach, or to grish or something, as they say. Oh, by the way, remember the whole water thing? Yeah, that's why you're not going in. So it's painful. Okay. What happens? Yes, Elian.
I don't understand then the whole thing of the red heifer.
What do you mean?
Well, because
Elian's asking you about the red heifer.
that was in those Parshat, and I thought that was because of the Cheregel and all of this.
Correct.
And the waters and all of this, and then you come to this. So what was the point of that?
So there are some say that the definitely the red heifer is a flip side. It's a tikkun, or it's a repair, a fix for Egel HaZahav. But even when you fix something, it's not completely fixed. This is unrelated to Egel HaZahav, except unless you argue for Aaron. For Aaron, that's why we discussed last week. But Moshe Rabbeinu, and that precedes the whole waters of strife. So I don't know if the Egel HaZahav, that's really meant for Tuam and Tahara. It doesn't necessarily, it's not going to fix everything you done wrong. And Moshe's involvement certainly had no involvement in the Egel. That wasn't his fault. Nobody ever held him accountable for it. He was on the mountain. He was working. It's Aaron, which she'll say that was his punishment. But here, maybe that's exactly what God is saying here, by the way. Aaron, you're going to die like Aaron. But Aaron died for what he died for. You're dying, even though we call it Mei Meriva. Aaron died for the Egel. You could read that. But here, you're dying Mei Meriva. There's no question about it. Okay, now, Moshe Rabbeinu, if you're Moshe Rabbeinu, and your leadership has been waning, and your influence has been diminished, and you're being left out of meetings, you get invited to board meetings anymore, and all these slowly but slowly, and God says, okay, you're done. What would your reaction be? So you can say, okay. I can't say I'm surprised. I saw this coming. But look what Moshe says. He says, no. Yifkod Hashem Elokei Rechos L'chol Basar Ish Al Yedai. No, this is Moshe's like he's still concerned about the people to the very end. You have to find someone that's good for them, God. Now it's interesting that some of the Mefarshim read into it that he wanted his own children to take over. He actually had that Havamina for like a half a second because God said, you're going to die like Aaron. And when he saw Aaron die, he saw that he had the mantle. We discussed it last week. He gave the mantle leadership directly over to Aaron. He didn't see that here. He's like, he had that fleeting thought maybe for a second. Okay? And then Hashem tells him, you're going to take Yehoshua bin Nun. Okay? But here we see, and it's, again, this is something that's so subtle, you could read it 1,000 times and not pick up on it, but it is perhaps the most heroic act that Moshe does as a leader. It's the only time in all of the Chumash that this happens, and it's such an innocuous pasuk, but when you read it carefully, you're like, oh my goodness, how do I miss this? Look at pasuk Tesvav, verse 15. Hashem just tells him, you're going to die, you're not going to go into the land of Israel, and then it says, Vayidaber Moshe el Hashem lemor. Like, wait, what's the big deal? Because what does it always say? It says, Vayidaber Hashem el Moshe lemor. God speaks to Moshe. What does it say here? Moshe speaks to God saying. Vayidaber is a strong language. It's not, oh, please, Vayispalel, Vayivakesh, Vayomer. Vayidaber, Hashem says, right? To Moshe, that's how we always have it. This is how you should command them. Moshe says, no. Moshe speaks to God, Lamor, and he says one last thing. God, if you're going to take me out this way, then I demand, I implore of you that we must have proper leadership that can handle this people. He recognizes that it's not him. Look at the closing medrash that we have here, the Sifrei. It's the last source on your page. Vaydaber Moshe, again, it's so obvious, but you could miss it 1,000,000 times. Because we're so used to reading the psukim, and our mouths go faster than our brains. But that's a whole other problem that we have to deal with another time. Moshe says to Hashem, the Sifrei says, Lahodia shivchan shel tzadikim, shekeshehem niftarim manichan atzman ve'oskim b'tzarech tzibur. Look at the praise of these righteous people, that when they leave their jobs, still, they put themselves, their own personal needs aside, their personal hurt aside, and they involve themselves with tzorech tzibur, with the needs of the community. Lamor, ain't tamad loma lamor, ma tamad loma lamor, ela emor lo, hodieni nai matami mimana aleihem parnasim imlav. What does it mean? Speak to God, saying what? He's saying, I want you to tell me right now, God, are you going to put somebody who's responsible in charge of them or not? And he wouldn't leave ad shashiva kadosh baruch hu v'amalokach l'cha es Yeshua. He says he wouldn't let him go until he said, almost, we have a language that some say that God, like he took God by the collar, and he held him. He says, and he kept bothering him, and he says, lay more, saying, until God said, okay, go appoint Yehoshua v'samachta es yadecha Allah. So whereas you could read that Moshe Rabbeinu maybe does not know how to lead this generation. Maybe his powers were diminished. Maybe his armor was shedding. And maybe he didn't have the same influence. But it does not detract one iota from his stature as a leader. And an example that he sets as a leader for the Jewish people, that to his last day, all he cared about was what was important for the people. Not for his own personal needs, not for his own personal hurt, not for his own personal losses even. That the Or Chaim said, we saw in last week's Parshat, that one of the reasons why the people were so vilified for the way they behaved after Miriam died and there was no water is that they didn't allow Moshe and Aaron time to mourn. And when you're in a leadership position, maybe your personal life is shot. They're talking about him. His own siblings are talking about him, and he can't get anything going, nothing doing. But at the very end, and again, it's found in one simple yet elegant pasuk, Vayidaber Moshe el Hashem lemor. Might be the most important pasuk in all of Bamidbar. It's something that's really, really fantastic. So you could see from the beginning of our parsha to the end, which is one leadership to another, maybe that's a microcosm of what's happening in the whole Sefer of Bamidbar, is going from one mode of leadership to another mode of leadership. And you have to understand, and this happens everywhere, by the way. It happens in shuls, it happens in schools, it happens in communities, it happens in every organization. You can't say that, oh, just because we've been doing the same thing, that's what's going to work. That's why we do it. It doesn't work. Look, if we didn't learn anything in the last 4 months, we learned that, you know what? we have to change gears. Everything as we have known it is different. Everything that we have accepted as normal, what Rosh Hashanah is going to look like, different. What Shabbos looks like now, different. What school looks like, different. What going to the supermarket looks like, different. Everything is different. And we have to figure out how to roll with it. We have to figure out how to adjust. And this is what the Chumash is teaching us. So it's so telling. Again, as we bring ultimately Sefer Bamidbar to a close, because then we have this Matos Maseh. It's really something that I think it's super telling. So again, this is not my Torah, it's Rabbi Helfgott. I'm just sharing with my Chav. I had the opportunity to speak to him about it on occasions, and it's really something I think is so brilliant and it's worth sharing. So again, everybody have a wonderful day. Thanks for joining us online, inside, and I will see everybody soon.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Take
Thank
care.
you, Rabbi.